Welcome to Gentle Historian Medieval Life. On this channel, we explore the fascinating, sometimes strange, and often unexpected details of life in the Middle Ages. From castles and peasants to food hygiene and family traditions, we bring the past to life with stories that are engaging, curious, and always a little surprising. Today's topic: how did medieval people deal with body odor without deodorant? Imagine walking into a medieval town square at noon. The market is alive with sounds, merchants, shouting donkeys, braying children laughing. But even stronger than the noise is the smell. Fish lying out on wooden stalls, raw meat hanging in the open air, tanners boiling hides, and crowds of unwashed bodies pressed together in narrow streets. Now imagine there is no toothpaste, no deodorant stick, no scented soap. That was daily life in the Middle Ages. But here's the catch: people didn't simply give up and live in filth. They had their own solutions based on beliefs, traditions, and whatever resources they had. Some worked better than we'd expect, others were bizarre, and a few were downright unpleasant. In this episode, we'll dive into the world of medieval hygiene and see how people tried to manage body odor without the products we take for granted today. The medieval understanding of cleanliness. In order to understand medieval hygiene, we first need to understand medieval medicine. Much of their knowledge came from ancient Greek and Roman writers, especially Galen and Hippocrates. These authorities taught that health depended on balancing the four humors: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Bathing, eating, even smells were thought to affect this balance. Doctors warned that too much bathing could weaken the body because opening the pores made you vulnerable to disease. This belief persisted well into the Renaissance. So, while we see daily showers as necessary, they saw restraint as wisdom. Cleanliness was important, but not in the sense of soap and scrubbing. It was about moderation and balance. At the same time, they lived in a world filled with odors. Cities were crowded with livestock, human waste was tossed into streets, and food markets had no refrigeration. People were sensitive to smell, but instead of eliminating odor, they focused on masking it with stronger, more pleasant scents. The medical idea of miasma shaped this. Miasma theory held that bad air-foul smells caused disease. So, keeping sweet smells around wasn't just vanity. It was, in their eyes, a defense against sickness. That belief would dominate European thinking until the rise of germ theory in the 19th century. Bathhouses and washing habits. One of the most vivid parts of medieval hygiene was the bathhouse. In towns like Paris, London, and Cologne, public bathhouses offered hot water, food, and even music. Men and women sometimes bathed together, and for a while it was considered healthy and social. For a penny or two, you could soak in hot water, share a meal, and catch up with neighbors. But over time, bathhouses gained a bad reputation. Some became linked with prostitution. Others were blamed for spreading disease, especially after waves of plague in the 14th century. Slowly, the culture of public bathing faded in Western Europe, even though it remained popular in Eastern Europe and the Islamic world. For ordinary people, bathing was occasional. Peasants might only bathe fully a few times a year, but they washed hands, feet, and faces more often. Instead of full baths, they used basins with cold water or wiped the body with linen cloths. This was known as dry washing. The wealthy, however, had more luxurious options. They could afford perfumed baths with rose petals, lavender, or rosemary. Nobles often had private baths in their homes with hot water poured by servants. Some even washed with wine or vinegar, believing it was cleansing. Imagine being a medieval traveler on the road. Inns sometimes offered tubs, but not always. Instead, you might clean up with a rag dipped in vinegar. Not glamorous, but it was something. The smell of sweat, smoke, and travel clung to you, but wiping down gave some relief. Clothing and linen as deodorant. Here's something surprising. Medieval people washed their clothes more often than their bodies. Linen was central to this. Linen shirts and undergarments absorbed sweat, acting as a barrier between the body and outer garments. Changing into clean linen could make you feel fresh without bathing. Nobles and the wealthy had several changes of linen and could switch multiple times a day. Elizabeth I of England reportedly changed her linen frequently, though she bathed only occasionally. Peasants with fewer clothes might not have that luxury, but linen was still valued for hygiene. Outer clothing, especially wool, was rarely washed. It was too expensive and too hard to clean. Instead, the focus was on keeping the linen layer clean. This is why laundresses were vital in medieval society. Washing involved soaking, beating, boiling, and drying fabrics, a long, laborious process. In addition, clothing could be scented. Herbs like lavender and rosemary were sewn into garments. Perfumed sachets hung around the neck or tucked into sleeves. Pomanders, small metal containers filled with spices, could be carried everywhere. These were like portable deodorants, masking not only your own smell, but also the stench of the streets. Herbal remedies and scent plants were the medieval solution to odor. Rosewater was widely used by the wealthy, both for the skin and as a room fragrance. Lavender was stuffed into pillows and sachets. Sage and rosemary were boiled in water and used for washing. Mint and thyme freshened breath chewed directly or steeped as tea. Perfume itself was still developing in Europe. Many scents were imported from the Middle East, where the art of distillation was more advanced. Musk, ambergris, and civet were rare and expensive, reserved for nobles. Wearing these was as much a status symbol as a hygiene measure. For peasants, the choices were simpler: local herbs, vinegar, or even smoke from wood fires. Some medical texts recommended rubbing armpits with crushed herbs or minerals, like alum. Interestingly, alum is still used today in natural deodorants. There are stories of noble women carrying ornate pomanders filled with clove or cinnamon. These not only helped them smell pleasant, but also reassured them they were safe from disease. Perfume and protection were one and the same. Social attitudes towards smell. Now let's talk about how people felt about smell itself. In the medieval world, sweat was normal. Chroniclers even wrote that a healthy man should have a natural odor. It was only when smells were extreme or offensive that they became shameful. Class differences played a role. Nobles were expected to smell better and use perfumes and fine linens to show refinement. Peasants living and working with animals had different standards. Their odor was simply part of survival. Religion influenced attitudes too. Some preachers condemned perfume as vanity, but others encouraged cleanliness as a sign of respect for God. During plagues, people believed foul odors could spread disease, so everyone from peasants to kings carried herbs, posies, or sponges soaked in vinegar. Doctors with plague masks filled the beaks with strong herbs for this reason. Smell was deeply tied to morality, class, and health. A sweet-smelling noblewoman was admired. A stinking beggar was seen as sinful. Odor shaped how society judged you. Comparisons and lasting impact. When we compare medieval methods to today, some seem laughable, but others were surprisingly effective. Linen undergarments really did help absorb sweat. Herbs like rosemary and mint did have antibacterial properties. Alum, as mentioned, is still in use. What changed was our understanding of bacteria. Once germ theory replaced, miasma theory, people realized baths and soap were more effective than perfumes. Daily bathing became common only in the 19th and 20th centuries. Before that, perfume was mostly about covering odor. Yet medieval practices paved the way. The popularity of scented herbs and oils grew into the perfume industry we know today. And ideas about cleanliness and health, though, shaped centuries of behavior. So next time you use deodorant, remember, it's part of a long human story. From vinegar wipes to perfumed sachets, people have always been fighting the battle against smell. And that's our journey into the world of medieval body odor. From bathhouses and linen shirts to herbs, perfumes, and pomanders, people found creative ways to deal with smell in a world without soap aisles or antiperspirant sticks. Could you survive a day in the Middle Ages surrounded by these odors? Or would you run straight to the nearest bathhouse? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this dive into medieval hygiene, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an episode. Stay curious, stay fresh, and be grateful for your modern deodorant